Allora, la mia presentazione oggi sarà in inglese perché è più facile, diciamo. So, I want to start the presentation with a key question. In a world of space exploration and potential future colonizations, how to perform CPR in space? So, have you ever asked how to deal with a cardiac arrest if, in a remote possibility, you find yourself in space? So that's a tricky question, as you know. So with our guidelines, we are going to show you how to deal with it. So our research group from ESAM Space Medicine Group, we have investigated how to do CPR in space during a space flight and gather together with lots of amazing others to write a guideline with the permission of the main authors. I'm going to be the one who is going to present here. So let's go through it. Why is it important to have a guideline? That's an important question if you're going to go through this presentation. So first of all, as we know, in the terrestrial environment, cardiac arrest is a very important medical condition and with high incidence too. And now that we are going, right now, if we go through the data, haven't been lots of, actually there has been no condition where, no event where we had an episode of cardiac arrest in space. But as you all guys know, we are planning to, with Artemis or other space projects, going to have extended extra low Earth orbit missions. So it's important to be prepared for the worst. So moreover, another point which comes in favor of underlining the importance of a guideline is the fact that a single medical emergency could endanger the whole experiment and the whole mission. So if you're going to go to Mars and it takes 2 years to go there, and you have a cardiac arrest there and you can't deal with it, it will endanger other astronauts and your crew members, and also lots of financial loss too. So that's something we have to take in consideration. So why is it important to write a new guideline in comparison to what we already have on Earth? For a simple thing that we doing CPR in space is tough. So for several reasons, we will go through it again later, but the main reason is that the space environment is totally different. So which were our aim of study? Our aim of study was to address the challenges of CPR microgravity. So go through which are the challenges, review CPR guidelines, so go through all the studies or researches which have been already done on it, put on recommendations and see how to go through it. And of course, draw a plot guideline for further studies, because of course in space medicine, it is a naive world where you can still go on and do lots of other things. So that was our main scope. So going through quickly, methods and material. This is a part where I won't be taking lots of time because you can go through it reading the paper. So I'll go through the methods more happily. So we had a task force of 27 members from ESA Space Medicine Group, and we have been checking through 15 keywords on PubMed. At the end, 88 publications were analyzed through great methods, and we went through it, and you will see the results, because results is always a main part, especially with non-experimental studies. So what are the challenges? I already told you that we have to go through this very importantly, because otherwise we will understand why we have to get this guideline, right? So when we perform a CPR on Earth, so on terrestrial and normal conditions, for us normal, of course, because it's about parameter and point of reference, the weight of the rescuer to perform chest compression is available. So that's how we do it. In space, it's not utilizable anymore. So that's something we have to take in consideration, and it is a huge challenge. And of course, that's strictly related to free floating because there is zero/microgravity and there is free floating. It's tough. And most of the astronauts who go are not medically expert. So, like, there is no, so far, there has been no figure of medical doctor aboard. So that could manage the condition and go through it systematically and give a very advanced management of any kind of pathological condition. So these three are the main of many other challenges. So I wanted to point on these three for sure. So how to do CPR in space? So we have come to the conclusion that we have, as per state of art, 5 techniques, 2 using straps and 3 in free floating. So we can go through them together. The one you're seeing here is the restrained CPR in standard position method. So that represents the most apparent approach to perform chest compressions in microgravity, as it's simply the application of the Earth-based standard technique. So it's something that's familiar, it's something that we know, but the point is it requires the rescuer and the patient to be fastened to CMRS. With CMRS, we mean Crew Medical Restraint System that you can see on the slide right now. The rescuer utilizes one strap around the waist and one strap across the lower legs to keep the position at the side of the patient's torso. So it was one of the first techniques to be investigated during parabolic flight because, as you can know, what we try is to bring what we know to something we don't know. So there's genophilesis, right? So this was the first method. And the second method is the straddling position of the restrained CPR method. So patients and rescuer are both attached to the CMRS again. And the difference here lies in the rescuer kneeling across a patient's vest and performing chest compressions on the top of the patient. So this leads to a significant reduction in the required space and could represent an advantage in spacecraft where space is limited. With space, we mean height-wise, as you can notice the difference between 8 slide, which is restrained CPR, and the 9 slide. So we have already seen 2 methods which are restrained. Let's go explore what are the free-floating methods. So this is a very nice method because it's reverse bear hug method. So this represents a modified version of a Heimlich maneuver with the rescuer enclosing the patient's chest from behind, as you can see from the photo. And the technique lends itself for CPR immediately at the site of cardiac arrest. So as it doesn't require the patient or rescuer to be restrained. So this is something that plays as advantage for us. But obviously, this technique cannot be performed with a patient restrained on the CMRS, which will lead to other couple of problems, which we will see going through recommendations. So going through the second free-floating method, that is HS, which is handstand method. So like the reverse bear hug method, the handstand method does not require the patient to be restrained on the CMRS, although it can be performed on a restrained patient too. So it is not reciprocated. So as you can see, the patient will be lying restrained on the CMRS and the rescuer will be free-floating. So the rescuer places their feet on an adequate surface and extends their hips and knees to generate a force of compression in the patient's chest. This technique comes with advantages. So, which is that using rescuer's lower extremity muscles, which will enable higher exercise endurance. So that's good in free floating. But we have also a major disadvantage, which is represented by the dependence on the distance between the patient and the passing surface, as well as the actual height of the rescuer. So those facts make the handstand method a very uncertain technique in an emergency, but still a valid one. The fifth and last one is actually my favorite. It's Yvette's Russomanno CPR method. So this is the newest technique by Dr. Russomanno, Professor Russomanno. And like the handstand and RBS methods, it doesn't require restrained patient, as you can see, and is suitable as a first aid instrument at the site of emergency. So what happens here? We have the rescuer who places their left leg over the patient's right shoulder, as you can see from the photo, and the right leg around the patient's torso. So by interlocking the ankles in the center of the patient's back, the rescuer attaches himself to the patient and now generates force onto the patient's chest without getting pushed away. So this is a very effective technique. So now that we know the techniques, what's important now? So our guideline includes 22 recommendations, which answers important questions through which we can go through very quickly. So recommendation 1. CPR should always be divided into a chain of survival consisting of BLS and ALS, as on ground, basically. And recommendation 2 is that in case of BLS, so when we want to start BLS, the first thing we do is the Yvette's-Russouano method, and then we can eventually pass to reverse Hack-Bear method. So 2 of them that we have talked about earlier. The other recommendation is that when it is possible to get into a CMRS, we have to prefer the handstand method, and of course a compressive chest device should always be used on restrained patient. So these are the first important recommendations. We have 22 of them. I won't be annoying you with all of them. I'll be going very quickly through important points that we have to understand in case in the future you'll be finding yourself on a spacecraft and you don't know how to make CPR. So recommendation 6 is that we should always try to get an airway management when we have a rescue with extensive training, because that's an important question. How do we get the air management in a patient? So the gold standard, as you know, we can have the airway management through different kinds of possibilities. So we are going, the gold standard, after lots of extensive research, is the tracheal intubation. So of course, the tracheal intubation is possible only when the patient and also the rescuer are both on crew medical restraint system. So you can't imagine floating patients and rescuer trying to put the tracheal intubation, even if you have tried it, but the time of performance is very different. So we have been doing an experiment under microgravity circumstances, in simulated microgravity circumstances, to understand which are the performance difference between a normal tracheal intubation timing and under microgravity in free floating. So the difference is significant. So it is important to be connected to crew medical restraint system. Of course, a defibrillator should be also used in patients that are restrained and electrically isolated, and this for the same reasons I've already told you. And we can go through next things. Oh, here the slide has been misformatted. I'm sorry, but the main things are that without fibrillation, CPR should stop when fibrillation is, even if it's not unavailable in space vehicle, and venous access should be performed only when we have more than 2 rescuers. Of course, you can go through which are the preferred recommendation, like preferred access. Of course, it's venous cannulation, but then when it's impossible, we go through intraosseous tibial route and that. Yeah. So last recommendation is regards telemedicine. Telemedicine is a very important topic. That's also another project we are working upon, and where there are, of course, differences of time and things like that. So we have to underline this recommendation. So in LEO, so in law of OBED, telemedicine support should be consulted in event of cardiac arrest. But in an extended space exploration, so a mission to Mars or things like that, a telemedicine support should be impractical, will be impractical because of the difference of time. So the delay, which is around 3 to 24 minutes, as you can read. So it shouldn't be attempted. And of course, the decision to terminate the CPR and the whole procedure is to the crew member with the highest medical qualification, as you can imagine. So coming to our last slide, the conclusion is that there are some limits to our guideline. First of all, is that real life experience is missing. So luckily missing. So luckily we don't have any no cardiac arrest or cardiac or any kind of emergency, serious kind of emergency in this decade has been happened. So we are lacking of real experience and science is based on facts, right? So that's something we are missing. But of course, the guideline is based on simulated microgravity, parabolical flight. So everything we said are valid, but we don't have any results from application. That's what I'm intending. Of course, there are only few studies regarding airway management that I've already talked about earlier when we were talking about the tracheal intubation. So that's another important aspect. And very important aspect is also that when we analyze the CPR, as you guys very well know, CPR is important, but it's important also the defibrillation, the drug therapy, the post-resurrection care, and the evidence and the studies for all this are minimal to non-existent, which makes things tough and which is an important point for further research. So it is necessary before attempting a Mars colonization, a moon colonization, or any other kind of long traveling. So acknowledgements and affiliations. I have to thank Professor Johan Hinkelbein, who is my mentor, and Dr. Stefan Kirchhoff, and who are the main authors of this study, and all the other authors, and Esam Space Medicine Group, my university, and of course a medical alphabet. And that's all. So stay interested in space, and if you have questions, I'm very willing to go through it.
Grazie mille Lidia, è stata la vera esposizione, grazie per il tuo original article. E allora abbiamo 2 domande per te, adesso provo a proiettarle.
Sì.
La prima domanda è questa.
Allora,
vedi Lidia?
Sì, la vedo. Have you considered the use of Lucas device? Manca come device, quindi
Lucas device.
se mi esatto, quindi se